Don't rock the boat. Well, one thing that has rocked the boat, I suppose, in the build-up to this Grand Prix, and what really flips everything on its head, if it wasn't already flipped in terms of Suzuki going out and rider seats suddenly becoming more available, Marc Marquez and that Honda seat. Of course, Keith, he said, well, just before the race, this is going to be it. This is my last one for, well, the indefinite future, really. He's going to go off to America and have surgery on that arm and fix, well, not just that, but I suppose his body, his mind. I think it needs a bit of a reset, according to his brother, saying that this is a weight off of his mind as well, that he's taken this decision. What do you make of it all?
29 years old, 8 Grand Prix World Championships behind him, an injury that isn't right. He isn't able to ride the bike how he wants to ride the bike, and that makes a massive difference to a man that rides a motorcycle like no one else rides a motorcycle. Right decision, and if it don't go right, then that's it. He's done. I think Marc Marquez is on the very cusp of ending his career, and he should, if that's the situation. You can't. We've said it we must have said it every week on this podcast. You can't keep crashing the way that he does. Otherwise you won't have a future in life, let alone in anything else. He's only there to win MotoGP, to win world titles. He's not interested in finishing, in the top 10. It's not what he aspires to. That's all. I think that this is the last chance he's chosen. They've clearly been looking at this operation for some time. He's done the best he can do with the equipment he's got, both bike and physically. He's a clever lad. He's not an idiot. He's not mad like everybody might say because he rides the way he rides. It's all calculated. If this doesn't work out, then that will be the end of Marc Marquez's career. The fact that he's taken this at this point and decided that if it takes all year, if I'm not back this year at all, then that's fine too. So I'm not saying we're going to find out until he gets back on a bike. We're not going to know until he gets back on a MotoGP bike and starts testing. Maybe that won't be until the Valencia test. Who knows, at the end of the season. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, this operation is a major, major operation. It's the last throw of the dice. If it doesn't quite work, then I think Marc Marquez will bite the bullet. I got a feeling that his mindset now, I think, is it's an all or nothing situation. A bit like he's riding, really, but it's now a situation where he will make that call, I think. I think he's had enough of trying with the injury he's got. Now it's either fix it or get rid of it.
It's been 18 months, isn't it, since the last operation? And you called it right from the start, Keith, that he wasn't in his normal riding position and he didn't look comfortable. And I think we all thought, and probably he thought and Honda hoped as well, that as he built up more muscle, more fitness, that maybe that would come back, but it hasn't, has it? He's still, as he says, his arm is still, it's the rotation, it's his elbow sort of stuck out, and it's not moving as it should. That's causing problems with pain, with weakness. He's now starting to get problems on his left shoulder because he's working his left side more to compensate for the problems on the right. So, as he said, Marc keeps things to himself with injuries and pain, doesn't he? But when this announcement came out, he said, I'm suffering a lot. I'm not enjoying it. And, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear why he's made this decision. He did say, big sigh of relief that the doctors were able to say, yes, there is something that can be done. He mentioned that he'd asked about this back in October, as you were saying, Keith. This has obviously been on the cards for a while when he was sidelined with the double vision. And of course, that, if you've got to sit out races and you need an operation, that would have been the time. But it seems that the bone wasn't ready then. It couldn't have been done. Exactly what this operation is, it sounds quite complicated. I certainly don't know the details. Mark spoke about they'll put sort of a crack in the arm, it also seems to be described almost like a window to sort of realign things. That seems to be what it involves. It won't involve, thankfully, going in, I think, to the infected area where you had the bone graft and everything last time. They won't be touching that. He did say this isn't a fault of the previous operation. That he's been to various doctors around the world. They all said that the last operation cleaned up the infection, which was a big deal. That all went well. So this is, but clearly, it's not a normal. It's not operating the way he needs, and he's not enjoying it. So, yeah, this is, as he says, it's got to be done. And of course, getting that decision on a Friday and then having to do the rest of the weekend, and knowing that if you fall and maybe damage it, that must have been weighing on his mind. And then he had that big accident in qualifying, of course. So thankfully he got through the weekend, and yeah, I mean, exactly, it's going to be a long time, was his words. Keith mentioned the Valencia test. I think, you know, that's realistic, isn't it? Best case, probably the Misano test, which is sort of September-ish. But yeah, certainly he's looking to 2023 now.
What a remarkable outpouring, though, on the slowdown lap. Have you ever seen anything like that? Every single rider that was anywhere in the vicinity of Marc Marquez, patting him on the back, giving him fist pumps. You know, actually, I'm not, as you might have guessed, an emotional man outwardly, but I felt quite emotional about that, watching him ride around there, because that was, every competitor was feeling it for him. You know, every competitor knows what he's gone through. Every competitor, you know, feels the pain. I mean, I don't know how he rides the way he's even able to ride with the pain he must have. I'm sitting here now. I've got a shoulder ache. I've got an arm ache. I've got every ache you can imagine from minor accidents from my racing career. You carry them forward. You're never actually pain-free. Most of those guys are never actually pain-free once you've got through the first couple of rounds. You've had a slip off here and a crash there. We all watch it on TV. Airbags have gone off. Yeah, everything's fine. Seen it in slow-mo where, you know, someone's got their foot wrapped around the back of their neck and the bike's dropped on top of them. And they get up and walk off. We're immune to what they're not. You know, they're being crushed and battered every single weekend. And you carry those through the year. You're never actually pain-free for the entire year once you started off. So I think that sometimes we've got to get it in context. You know, what he is going through is massive every single weekend. The pain level, the fact that the frustration level that he's going through, trying to make that work the way he needs to make it work. And finally, we've got to the point where it's do something about it or stop completely. And I think that's the point we're at now. And fair dues. I mean, Honda will support him forever. You know, if it takes 2 years, if he wants to come back in 2 years' time, there'll be a Honda there for him. But he'll make the call. 29 years old. He's just beginning to get to the zone. He ain't never going to be worried about money. He's never going to be worried about whatever he worries about. It's all taken care of. His family's taken care of. He'll worry about his brother next rather than himself. Fingers crossed. They managed to fix it and we see the mark of old. But I've got to say, it's a long shot from where I'm sat.
Worth saying, of course, isn't it, that, you know, even before the arm problems, he'd had 2 major surgeries on his shoulders. You know, he's had the double vision problems as well. It's been multiple things at the same time he's been dealing with. And exactly as you were saying, Keith, Aleix Espargaro, you know, he said, look, Mark is the strongest guy mentally, but everybody has a limit. And you know, it just must, these last few years have been pretty miserable for him. You know, after such a perfect start to his career, really, in MotoGP, wasn't it? From 2013, winning all those years. Okay, the 1 year, 2015, but up until 2019, and then suddenly, bang, everything for the last couple of years has just gone wrong. So, yeah, let's hope that this last roll of the dice, as it seems to be, works, and he can enjoy riding again, as he says. You know, I mean, he can win a few races a year. We've seen that already. You know, we saw last year he could have won COTA this year, but he's not enjoying it. He's in pain, and certainly he can't win a world championship riding like this. So, the first thing is to get his enjoyment back, and as he says, the results will follow. So, let's hope the doctors are right and that this will make a big difference.
Yeah, well, I think we all wish him the very best and as speedy a recovery as possible for Marc Marquez. But what this does do is it poses an even bigger problem for Honda in terms of, well, who do they bring in to replace him, Keith? And actually, could we see a whole brand new lineup across both teams, the factory and satellite, for next year? Because even with these pains and issues, Marc Marquez has still been the top Honda more often than not.
Yeah, that question I saw on Twitter. Where are the aliens? We've run out of aliens. There are none anymore. You know, who would you consider to be an alien in today's grid? Well, they're all pretty damn good. There's no doubt about that. But there's none of those ones that you look at and go, how does he do that? Like your Marquez, Lorenzo's, Stoners, Freddie Spencer, if you go back that far, Kenny Roberts, if you want to go back a bit further. You know, there are no real aliens at this moment in time. But the great thing about motorbike racing is you just don't know what's coming next. Pedro Acosta. All of a sudden, he's gone Moto3 world champion, looking like an alien on a Moto3. Little bit of a slow old start by his standards in Moto2. Bang, Mugello, he's there. And even though he's something like, I think it's 63 points, slay me if I'm wrong, but 63 points behind, I'll tell you what, based on Moto3 form from the past, if he manages to pick up the pace now in Moto2, he could still win this championship. So keep an eye on Pedro Acosta. Now, there are going to be people scrabbling around trying to sort out people like him for factory contracts in MotoGP. Pol Espargaro hasn't performed. It hasn't worked out at Honda, going back to Honda, for Pol Espargaro. Taka Nakagami, he's had his go. It's not happening for Taka Nakagami. So start looking at, Ogura or whatever you might like. There are other riders there, but will they make that step to be the kind of alien material that Honda need? Honda are going to be in the doldrums for a while yet. We talk about Yamaha being in trouble, but at least they got Quartararo. What it needs is at the end of the contract period for somebody to go, here's $20 million. We want you. That's what it's going to take. You're going to have to buy talent, and you're going to have to buy that. It's not very Japanese, I've got to say, so I doubt that will happen. But it's that old thing, isn't it? When Marc Marquez was at the very, very top of his game, and there was the KTM rumours, if you like. KTM could have afforded him. KTM could have bought him. But if he'd won, it would have been Marc Marquez. If he'd lost, it would have been the fault of the KTM. So you're on a hiding to nothing. So it's all very well buying the top talent. Better you can do it with the ones you've got or the pipeline that you've got already, which is the other worry about Yamaha, isn't it? Where's their pipeline if they've not got a satellite? We can keep going on. I'm sorry if I'm picking on Yamaha a little bit because I love Yamaha. Yamaha have made, for me, consistently the best motorcycles for decades. We are talking about decades on decades of top quality, affordable, if you're a privateer, motorcycles, right up to Grand Prix level. So to see them in this kind of wishy-washy, can't quite nail it together kind of a scenario, just it frustrates me. I can't imagine what it's like being in the team. And it's got to come from board level. There's got to be something. I mean, Lynn Jarvis and co, these guys have been around a long time. They know what they're doing. It just seems somebody somewhere is holding the reins above them, probably like Suzuki. Suzuki had no clue at track level what was going on at board level. And I get the feeling that Yamaha are in a similar situation. We go back to, is it selling superbikes? No, superbikes aren't selling at the moment. It's every other type of motorcycle. Is MotoGP prohibitively costly? Well, yes, it is. But welcome to a prototype series. It's going to be a tough thing. And Dorna, the FIM, IRTA to some extent, but the Dorna particularly, we're into a scenario that's getting really, really difficult for teams, promoters, tracks. Mugello were greedy at the weekend trying to fill their coffers. I think they thought this is the last hurrah of seeing Valentino at trackside. We'll ramp the prices to this ridiculous level and try and grab back some of the money we've lost over the last couple of years. And it failed miserably. 45,000 people at trackside on a Sunday in Mugello. Unbelievable. They misread that one, that's for sure.
I'll keep it brief, but just on the alien question, I think Quartararo is making quite a case for it. I think if you're looking for the next one, that especially at this track, a top speed track, I thought that was a great ride from him to be, up there fighting with the Ducatis. And on the Yamaha situation, you've got to imagine that it seems like they misjudged the situation with RNF, that maybe they didn't think that RNF might go to Aprilia or go to anyone else. And they were sort of, I think they expected this deal to be renewed. And Razem Razali is obviously not willing to sort of wait around and have his whole future hanging on a Yamaha decision. And he's gone and got, basically a 4-year deal from Aprilia, 2 years plus 2, it seems, and really secured his team's future. So, there's a bit of a misjudgment went on somewhere there back at the Yamaha board, I think.
What happens there, though, in terms of their riders? I mean, I'm presuming Dovi's he's done after this year. I think we've said that already. But Darren Binder, what happens there? Because performing fairly well against certainly Dovi, but also beat Morbidelli to the line this weekend. Morbidelli once again. Keith, shocker really compared to Quartararo. So it's like every week, isn't it? Really, where there's some sort of we just talk about riders, really. It seems, but it's just you have no idea what's going to come next, do you?
Well, that's where that KTM ruthlessness that I was talking about earlier. They're short on patience because you've got to make the move. You've got to make the decision. Dovi, I can understand why they signed Dovi. Dovi could have brought something to the table. He could have brought development. He's ridden across the classes. He's ridden really, really good motorbikes. He's been a world champion in the past. Good, safe pair of hands, you would have thought. But it's moved on. This year's moved on. You look at the lap times, the track times, the track speeds, and so on and so forth. It's amazing how suddenly you become yesterday's man in that situation. Dovi's done. He has been all year. They've honoured the contract. They've kept him going. They've got no one else to really replace him with, to be frank. But moving forward, I'll be amazed if Dovi is anywhere in MotoGP next year, other than some kind of management role or whatever he might decide to do. Yamaha have got a problem. Morbidelli, nobody really speaks to him. We don't really hear very much from Morbidelli. I mean, that injury that he had, obviously it's affected his performance both mentally and physically. Is that it? I've seen riders in the past where they've taken a fair clattering and they've never really recovered from it mentally. They've never really got back that mojo. And with racing as close as it is, everyone within a second, it takes an over-the-top commitment to grab that last... I was going to say inch, and then I was thinking of Boris's imperial bloody measurement situation. I reluctantly said inch. I meant 20 mil, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, dear me. I'll tell you what, this could be a ramble now, couldn't it? Let's have 240 pence in the pound again, shall we? And go with 20 shillings and so on and so forth. I actually went through, my kids were asking me about that the other day. They said, what is imperial, Dad? So because I'm old enough to remember the transition to metric, and I remember how difficult it was at school at the time, or not difficult actually, because it's quite a bit easier to count in tens than it is to start talking about 20 shillings in a pound and 240 pennies in a pound. Oh, dearie me. Anyway, back to it. Pinching an inch is what it's all about. And you really,
for our non-UK audience, count yourself lucky.
Well, yeah. Was that an inch or 20 mil? Someone said to me. 25 mil, isn't it? An inch? I don't know. Fucking me.
I didn't expect this wasn't in the show notes.
No, it wasn't in the show notes. Sorry about that. But you know me, I do go off at a tangent. But it's one of them things where everybody's got to find that last few mil. It's that last bit of entry on braking. Tapping the throttle a little early. Yeah. It's so fine now at MotoGP. We talk about Moto3, we talk about Moto2 sometimes being close, but MotoGP is incredible considering all the different platforms that these are performing across, from inline, fours to V4s and so on and so forth. Different characteristics of motorbikes, all with the same tyres, different aero, and they're all within, the widest gap is a second, a lap. It's incredible. So people like Dovi, basically, the extra commitment you need, I don't think it's there for him. I don't think he's got the headroom for that now. So you start looking at youngsters who are going to be putting it in, who are going to understand what Marc Marquez did, 8 years ago or whatever it was, when he first changed the whole style. And you suddenly saw the likes of Valentino Rossi having to experiment with Marc Marquez style antics on a motorbike and having to do that. Otherwise, he wasn't going to be able to perform anymore. And old dog new tricks. He managed to learn some, whereas most people slightly older won't be able to learn them. I've never stopped rambling, as you've noticed.
No, but that's why you're here, Keith.
It definitely sounds like
the funniest troll that I had this week. The funniest troll I noticed on Twitter was, "Who is that granddad?"
Yeah, I think I saw that one
Whoever
as well.
you were,
I enjoyed that. Oh, well, I've got Grandad over here. Pete, yeah, I mean, just to pick up on what Keith was saying, now obviously, Dovi, but again, just to come back on Morbidelli, because I feel like we haven't really spoken much about him, but only because he's not been there. He's been anonymous. And before his incident, maybe there was an argument to go back to our alien chat that he might have been able to be one of the next ones coming through. But... and I hate to say this, because who am I to say this, but is this him done as well, if he can't get anywhere near to scoring podiums like Quartararo?
I mean, the good thing for Frankie is that he does have this contract in place.
Yeah, but you could be bought out of contracts, can't you? The contracts in racing don't mean a thing.
Yeah, traditionally the Japanese factories they
Okay.
do, with the riders, it's quite, yeah. I mean, potentially he could have been. We've seen examples going back to Dovi in the past. There was the famous example of Stoner came into Repsol Honda. Dovi had a contract that said, you're staying with the team, and they ended up having to run 3 Repsol Hondas.
Oh,
So they had an
right.
extra
Yeah.
bike. They had Pedrosa, Dovizioso, and Stoner arriving. So yeah, so I think Morbidelli can feel safe as far as next year. But as you say, Harry, making the perfect point there. I mean, he got on that Yamaha at the same time as Quartararo and with an extra year of MotoGP experience at the time. And they moved up together. Morbidelli was supposed to be the team leader, let's say, at Petronas SRT. And he was initially, but pretty soon, Quartararo starts to emerge. Still, Frankie fought back the second year. Great second year on the older bike. But then, that injury at the start of last year, it just hasn't happened since. Now, obviously, he's changed teams. He hasn't got his crew around him. He had Roman Forcada, vast experienced guy who was Lorenzo's crew chief. He's still, he's working with Dovi now in the, still at the RNF team. So we don't really hear, because Frankie's not really saying, a clear problem. It just seems to be that, as Keith's been saying, everything's so close that it's a little bit of time here and there. But I mean, it's such a gap, isn't it, between Frankie and Quartararo, and you do get the impression, certainly, that Yamaha are putting the pressure on Frankie a bit of, that you need to be closer than this. And yeah, I mean, as you were saying about Toprak, it means now that there isn't a seat available. There's no satellite team now. He would have to find a seat somewhere else. But there's such an overload of riders. I mean, we've lost 2, so 2 riders need to leave, don't they? I mean, that's the bottom line. Even if nobody comes up for Moto2, we've got to lose 2 riders. As you were saying, Dovi, I mean, he said himself, if I'm not competitive, I'm not even thinking about next year. So, and then someone else, and that's without anybody stepping up. And we've seen that. Could there be Vietti coming back to form in Moto2, making a case that maybe he should be moving up? So, yeah, there's going to be a scramble on for these last few seats.
Well, you got Mir and Rins in there as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I just want to make the point, though, Keith, now that Pete says, we might not get anybody still.